Hey lady, welcome to the Postpartum on Purpose podcast. If we haven't met, my name is Anne Marie and I'm wife to James and mom to 4 beautiful kids, ranging from 9 down to 1 with one on the way. My hope is to help other women experience postpartum as a time of grit, growth, and grace. This is episode 46. Hi lady, how are ya? Listen, I wanted to hop on for just a minute today. This will be real brief because I've got out-of-state relatives visiting. My oldest sons, or oldest in general, first communion and confirmation were last night, and everybody else is waiting for me, and I am in turn waiting for my crock pot to finish so I can bring our pulled pork to meet everybody. But, and you may also hear my youngest in the background because he's the only one home with me, but I wanted to talk just super briefly about when you are charting your cycle using NFP, natural family planning, or fertility awareness, FAM method, and you find yourself getting lazy. And I am using the term lazy because I think that's the term that women use, not because I think it's a great term or because I think it's accurate. Here's why I say that. And I've used it myself, so it's not a judgment on anybody. When we say I'm getting lazy or feeling lazy with my charting, what we mostly mean, I think, is I am not interested or motivated enough to keep up with the charting requirements for the method I'm using. Maybe that method is the Creighton method. Maybe it's the Marquette method. Maybe it's FEM, Boston crosscheck, fill in the blank. Couple to couple, symptothermal, whatever it is. The requirements for that particular method seem more onerous or burdensome than not following them. Now, this could be for several reasons. One, it might be because your cycle is now predictable enough during postpartum that you don't need to follow every single rule to have a general sense of when you're fertile and when you're not. And there can be a lot of variability as far as this goes within the postpartum period. And a lot of variability from woman to woman, maybe even from one postpartum period to the next, but certainly from one woman to the next. You may find that your cycle returns and then is very predictable. You may find, as a lot of women do, that your cycle returns and then you have several cycles that, first of all, the periods are heavier, but also there may be a long time between cycles, almost as if you had a polycystic ovary, an irregular cycle consistent with PCOS. Generally, those will get shorter and then should become regular. And if they don't ever become regular within that first, I don't know, I think it's within 3 to 6 cycles they should regulate. Now, that may not be 3 to 6 months, but at least within 3 to 6 cycles, they should become regular again by that time. If that doesn't happen, you need to speak to a doctor, nurse practitioner, what have you, trained in restorative reproductive medicine, or your method, to figure out why that's not happening. Maybe there's a hormonal issue, etc. But let's say that your cycles have become regular and your charting method requires more data than you are willing to put down on paper. Here's what that can mean, other than I'm lazy. Here's what it can mean instead. It can mean I am comfortable enough with this method that I can tell when I'm fertile and when I'm not. Or it could mean this method is no longer a great fit for me. Perhaps I need to find something else. I've talked about this in a previous episode about Creighton versus Marquette in postpartum, but Creighton for me was very difficult during several postpartums because it required a certain amount of dry days with no mucus, and for those postpartum periods, I was having continuous mucus every single day. Of course, you're not fertile every single day, but if you are having continuous mucus, that can make it really difficult to differentiate fertile from non-fertile mucus, especially if you are following the rules and observing every single time before you go to the bathroom, every single time after you go to the bathroom. So I just found that the requirements of Creighton became more burdensome to me than they were worth, which was at that time the benefit of postponing pregnancy. I switched to Marquette method and found that that was burdensome because the machine read high, 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 high continuously for 60 days. And it wasn't. I wasn't fertile. My fertility had not returned. Eventually, the monitor sort of figured out my pattern, reset, and then sometime later on, maybe a month and a half, I don't remember at this time, sometime later on, then I had a true rise, an ovulation suspected, and then my period came back after that. So perhaps if you are finding yourself not really wanting to chart anymore, rather than putting a label on it of I'm lazy, perhaps you could ask yourself a couple of questions. One of them is my issue with this particular method that the requirements feel burdensome to me? Is my issue that I just need to switch? Just need to switch to a different method? And if that's the case, I would invite you to do that without putting any judgment on yourself, but simply to say, X method may not be a great fit for me right now. Perhaps when you get back into regular periods or regular cycles, maybe you'll return to this method. Maybe you won't, but maybe you will. But if you could take the judgment out of the equation and simply say, is this method working for me right now? Another question I'd love for you to ask yourself is, am I actually just more open to the possibility of a pregnancy than I was previously? Am I more open to the possibility of a pregnancy than I was previously? In NFP speak or FAM speak online, there's a term, TTW. That's an abbreviation, not a term. An abbreviation TTW, trying to whatever. Which means you're not necessarily trying to conceive, but you're also not actively trying to avoid. And this can be a wide area. There can be a lot of people in this pool of TTW. And it is a pool that would be unfamiliar to users of hormonal birth control who are in an off-switch position, off-switch setting, right? If you are on hormonal birth control for contraception purposes, you are trying to avoid pregnancy. But for women who use NFP, FAM, there is often a fairly broad swath or wide group, maybe like time frame of TTW. Maybe I'm not actively trying to conceive, but I'm not actively trying to avoid either. And I would just propose to you that maybe that's where you are. If you're finding I'm charting, but I'm charting now in my head instead of charting on paper or in my phone, in an app, maybe instead of saying, I just need to be better about this, maybe you could ask yourself, is it really that important to me? Or is it not? And of course, that's a conversation, right, for you and your husband to have. I'm not here to tell you that. But I'm just simply saying, if you find yourself slacking, in quotation marks, on your charting, maybe you just need to examine why that is. Maybe you just need to examine it and see what you find. All right, lady. I think that's probably enough for today. I will look forward to talking to you next week, unless, of course, the baby comes sooner. Right now, I am 36 and 5, and I had my appointment this afternoon. The OB said she could check me because she was doing my GBS swab, but I said, no, that's okay. But I told her at that time, I don't know. I have this thought in my head that maybe I won't go as long as I do with the other kids. I don't know if that's a thought or real. But if there's a break in recording for a little while, then I guess you'll know. All right, lady. Talk to you later. Bye.